I've always loved the water. There's something about the sound of ripples, the way sunlight dances on the surface, and the quiet patience of fishing that makes the rest of the world fade away. For me, sitting with a rod in my hand was more than a hobby, and it was therapy. So when I moved into Lakeside Estates, I thought I'd found paradise. The neighborhood was built around a small private lake, the kind you'd see in postcards. Ducks glided across the surface in the mornings. Kids skipped rocks in the evenings. And every time I looked out from my back porch, I thought, this is home. But paradise has a way of hiding its cracks. And in my case, those cracks came in the form of 3 letters that would eventually turn my world upside down, HOA. At first, I didn't pay much attention to the Homeowners Association. They sent out newsletters with rules about lawn heights and approved paint colors. Honestly, I thought most of it was harmless. I kept my grass trimmed, my trash bins tucked away, and minded my own business. Fishing in the lake felt like the most natural thing in the world. I wasn't hurting anyone. I wasn't leaving trash behind. Sometimes I didn't even keep the fish. I just let them go. But one Saturday morning, while I was sitting on the dock with my line cast out, a voice cut through the peace. "Excuse me, sir. Are you aware that fishing is prohibited here?" I turned to see a woman in her 50s walking briskly toward me. She had a clipboard tucked under her arm like it was part of her body. Her name was Marlene, though most people in the neighborhood just called her the HOA hawk. I smiled politely. "I live here, just enjoying the lake. Didn't see a problem." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It is a problem. The HOA bylaws clearly state that fishing is not allowed unless approved by the board. We've had issues before. Liability concerns. Fish populations. Rules are rules." I tried to laugh it off. "Come on, it's just fishing. I'm not exactly running a seafood business out here." She didn't laugh. She scribbled something on her clipboard and handed me a slip. A fine, $200, for fishing in my own neighborhood lake. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Surely this had to be some overreach. I called the HOA office to dispute it. The man on the other end spoke in a monotone voice, like he'd said the same thing 100 times before. "Sir, fines are issued according to the community bylaws. You can appeal in front of the board at the next scheduled meeting. But until then, the fine stands." I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of disbelief and anger. I wasn't some reckless teenager vandalizing property. I was a grown man, a homeowner, doing something peaceful and innocent. When I told my neighbor Rick about it, he shook his head. "They've been cracking down on everything lately. My wife got fined because our Christmas lights were up 2 days past the deadline. It's like they're just looking for reasons to control people." That night, I sat on my porch staring at the lake. The same lake that had drawn me here in the first place. The same lake I was suddenly not allowed to touch without permission from people who didn't even own it. And that's when it hit me. Maybe they didn't own it. Maybe nobody did. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I drove down to the county records office. The woman behind the counter helped me pull up property records. I expected to see Lakeside Estates HOA listed as the owner of the lake. But instead, the record showed something surprising. The lake wasn't officially owned by the HOA. It was owned by a private entity that had gone defunct years ago when the neighborhood was first developed. In other words, the lake was essentially up for grabs. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. The HOA had been acting like the lake was theirs, enforcing rules, collecting fines, waving around their bylaws. But legally, they didn't have a claim. That was the moment a spark lit inside me. If they wanted to play games, fine. If they wanted to push me around for something as harmless as fishing, fine. But I wasn't going to just take it. No, I was going to take back the lake. The following week, I showed up at the HOA board meeting. It was held in the community clubhouse, a building that looked nicer than it had any right to, considering how much they squeezed from homeowners in fees. The room was half full of residents, many of them sitting stiffly in folding chairs. At the front sat the board, 5 people with stacks of papers in front of them, like they were running the Supreme Court. Marlene was there too, her clipboard perched proudly on the table. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up. "I got fined for fishing in the lake," I began, "and I think it's ridiculous. I wasn't hurting anyone. I wasn't breaking the law. And frankly, I don't think you even have the authority to fine me for using it." There were murmurs from the crowd. Some nodded. Others avoided eye contact. The HOA president, a balding man with glasses, cleared his throat. "Sir, the rules are in place for the benefit of the entire community. Fishing creates liability issues, not to mention the environmental impact. I cut him off. With respect, the county records show that this lake doesn't even belong to the HOA, so I'm curious, on what grounds are you fining me? That got their attention. Even Marlene's pen froze mid-scribble. The president shifted uncomfortably. Regardless of ownership, the HOA governs usage of common areas within the community. That includes the lake. I looked him dead in the eye. Not if the lake isn't yours. After the meeting, a few neighbors approached me quietly. You're right, one whispered. They act like they own everything. It's about time someone called them out. Another shook his head nervously. Be careful. They'll make your life miserable if you push them too hard. I smiled. They already fined me for fishing. What more can they do? But deep down, I knew the answer, a lot. Over the next month, the fines kept coming. One day, I got a notice for having my garbage cans visible for too long. Another week, they said my lawn wasn't trimmed evenly enough. Then came a letter claiming my porch light was too bright at night. It was obvious. They were targeting me. Rick laughed when I showed him the stack of letters. They're trying to break you, man. Maybe, I said. But they don't realize they've already woken something up in me. I pulled out the paperwork I'd gotten from the county. It had taken some digging, but I'd found the contact information for the old developer, who technically still owned the lake. He was an older man now, retired and living in another state. When I called him, he sounded relieved. That lake? Oh, I've been trying to unload that headache for years, he said. Taxes are a pain and I don't live anywhere near there. You want it? It's yours and for the right price. I nearly dropped the phone. How much are we talking? When he gave me the number, my jaw tightened. It wasn't cheap, but it was doable. More importantly, it was worth it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by my window staring at the lake, the moonlight shimmering across its surface. In that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to fight the HOA. I was going to own the very thing they were trying to control. The purchase process wasn't easy. There were lawyers, paperwork, and fees. I drained a big chunk of my savings. At one point, I almost backed out, wondering if it was all too much. But every time I thought about Marlene's smug face, every time I saw another fine in my mailbox, I reminded myself this isn't just about fishing anymore. This is about standing up to bullies. 2 months later, the deed arrived in the mail. I held the document in my hands, my heart pounding. It was official. The lake and the one they fined me for touching what was now mine. I didn't waste time. The next HOA meeting was the perfect stage. I waited until the end of the session, then stood up. I have an announcement, I said, pulling a folded paper from my pocket. As of last week, I am the legal owner of the lake. The very same lake this board has been pretending to control. The room went dead silent. Marlene blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The president's glasses slid down his nose as he stared at me. And since it's mine, I continued, let me make something crystal clear. From this day forward, the HOA has no say over this lake. None. Zip. Zero. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few neighbors even clapped. I wasn't done. I unfolded the paper fully and held it up. And here's the kicker. As the owner, I'm implementing a new rule. Fishing is now officially allowed, but only for me and my invited guests. Everyone else, banned. The look on Marlene's face was priceless. As I walked out of the clubhouse, Adrena,